What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Grid Encore. I'm your host, Ben Schneider. You may notice something a little bit different. I'm going solo tonight. I do not have a co-host. Brandon is off tonight. Hopefully we communicated that to everybody. This was known a couple weeks here in advance. I was able to reach out to a few of my teammates here at Grid Network. Unfortunately, they all had schedule conflicts. Nobody was available to fill in. So it's just me tonight. So I ask that you bear with me a little bit here. I do have a little bit of experience doing solo radio back my Gordon College days on our Scott Radio network here, but it has been several years since I've done that. And I can tell you from experience, solo radio or solo podcasting or streaming is one of the most difficult things to do in the world of media because you don't have anybody to bounce off of. So tonight, more than ever, I invite you, if you have any questions or comments, want to counter an argument that I'm making or have a follow-up to anything we're discussing tonight. We've got a lot of racing in Iowa that we're going to be going through here in just a moment, but feel free, comment in the chat room if you're watching this on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, wherever, and I'll do my best to pull your comment up and we can continue the conversation from there. Also, a little bit of a programming note, we are covering the Cup Series race tonight at Iowa as well. Wrap-up only covered the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Congratulations to Ferrari. I think the first team to win Monaco and Le Mans in the same calendar year, I think since 1934. I saw that stat right before coming on the air tonight, so congratulations to them. But Wrap-Up had that and the Supercars weekend yesterday because of the way the timing of the Cup Series race worked. Encore picks up the Cup race. Otherwise, we would have been doing a Wrap-Up show at probably 10 o'clock last night, and that just isn't feasible for you all with the timing of how things would have worked out. So Encore takes the Cup Series. We'll start with that. And then we'll get into Xfinity and ARCA, the ARCA and ARCA East combo race. And I'll do a little bit of an open segment as well, because I have some thoughts on the return of NASCAR and NBC to the broadcast schedule here as we get into the second half of the season. But first, as always, I want to give a shout out to our Patreon investors, Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Thank you so much for your continued support of what we're doing here at Grid Network. And if you like what you see tonight, I know it's a little bit of a different show tonight with just me. Normally, I will have a co-host, and Brandon will echo my sentiment here. We would be very appreciative if you enjoy what you're seeing. You want to help us contribute to what we're trying to build here at the Grid Network. You can join these lovely folks through Patreon or through our YouTube memberships we now have enabled as well. If you would rather make a one-time donation instead, you can visit the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box below. You can buy a coffee for anybody here at Grid Network, myself included here. Goodness knows I certainly need it after a weekend of traveling once again. You can see I'm back in my Delaware space here this week and still recovering from my Portland and Sonoma trip, of the show must go on. So we're here tonight. Thank you so much to those of us that have bought us coffee or donated through YouTube Super Chats before. That's an option for you as well if you'd rather just make a one-time donation instead. But of course, as always, just following us on all our social media platforms is a great way to support us as well, particularly subscribing to us here on our YouTube channel. Thank you all so much again for helping us get over 1,000 subscribers. Here's to the next 1,000 as we continue to grow. I want to say hi to our audience in Australia, New Zealand as well. Been looking at our analytics. We have a very strong viewership base from over down there, and great to see we're expanding our reach there as well. I know it was probably disappointing for a lot of you this weekend with SVG not being able to go for 3 in a row here in the Xfinity race, and we'll get into that a little bit later on in the show as well. But thank you all again so much for your support. It means the world to us and allows us to continue to take the momentum that we've had from the last several weeks and put it back into what we're doing here at Grid and hopefully make the product a little bit better for you all down the road. Now let's start with the Cup Series race, and Ryan Blaney scored some redemption for his near miss at Gateway when he ran out of fuel coming to take the white flag. Not this time. Blaney ends up taking the win, and he's the first driver to win at Iowa Speedway in all 3 series, the Craftsman Trucks, Xfinity, and Cup. Of course, this was the first year that anybody would have the opportunity to do that. But for the defending Cup Series champion, certainly a welcomed change of pace. I know it hasn't been the start to the year that Ryan Blaney would have liked. He was in a great battle with Kyle Larson all throughout the first couple of stages. They split the stage victories, I believe. Blaney taking stage 1, Larson taking stage 2, if I recall correctly. Larson, unfortunately, ended up with a much worse finish than he probably deserved with how he was running. Don't remember off the top of my head. You see him down there in 34th. Not a great result for him after some contact with Daniel Suarez took him out of contention. He certainly had a much better car than his finish will show. So he is looking to continue to rebound from having to miss the Coke 600. Looked like he was going to back up his Sonoma triumph this weekend potentially, and if not get a win, at least have a strong finish. Unfortunately for him, was not meant to be. Also not meant to be for Kyle Busch, who looked like he might get a solid run going. Unfortunately for him, he also had an instant where he hit the wall, and that was the end of his night. So Kyle Busch actually right now at the moment below the playoff cut line, still looking for that first win of the year, and on a stretch now where it's been more than 365 days. Of course, Gateway in 2023 was the last time that he won a Cup Series race, so it's been a long time coming for him and the entire Richard Childress Racing team, because Austin Dillon certainly hasn't been running where he would have liked to be running in that 3 car either. So it's going to be interesting to see if Kyle can recover from this and keep that run going. He's never missed the playoffs in this 2014 to present elimination era, but the RCR cars just have not had the speed necessary for him this year to get the runs that he's desired. And unfortunately, this 35th place result is not going to go a very long way in helping his cause if he wants to continue that streak. But obviously much better fortunes for Ryan Blaney, and the defending champion can now solidly say that he will have a shot at defending that championship once again. And Team Penske, 2 of their 3 drivers picking up wins here in recent weeks. Of course, Austin Cindric got the win at Gateway. Joey Logano, another driver that's in a similar position right now to Kyle Busch, kind of borderline making the playoffs or not. Somebody maybe needs to remind him that it's an even year. He's made a championship 4 in all those even years. We'll see if Joey can get things turned around. But I think for Penske and really the entire Ford camp in particular, because that was one of the common themes at the start of the season, was when's Ford actually going to break through to get these race wins that we know they're capable of doing. We know that their drivers are capable of doing. Now 2 of the 3 Penske cars have done so. And I have no doubt Joey Logano certainly not lacking in driver talent and in speed underneath those Penske Fords. I think he's certainly got an opportunity in the next several weeks to break through with his own number 22 team. Solid 6th place result for him last night at Iowa. Josh Berry, another strong result for him as well. Of course, there's ongoing uncertainty with all the Stewart-Haas drivers. We know that team's going away at the end of the year. So a drive like this, I think for Josh in particular, will go a long way if he can string runs like this together. And I think he was even saying after the race that he thinks he's got race-winning speed in that car if they can just kind of put everything together and have a perfect weekend. So we'll see if they can build on this. Some other strong, solid top 15 results for Todd Gilliland, Justin Haley, Carson Hocevar. Not bad runs for them either. And unfortunately, kind of a weekend from hell to forget for AJ Allmendinger. 36th and last place in the Cup Series race. Also, I believe, second to last in the Xfinity race with tires coming to bite him in both races here. That was kind of a common theme all throughout both of these races here. But I have to say, I was pretty concerned based on kind of the trends and the storylines coming into this race. I know that we were at the tweet up at Sonoma, and Jeff Gluck was saying the same thing. You know, everybody asking why in the world would Iowa just repave the bottom lane here? It's going to make it a 1-groove race. Nobody's going to be able to pass, and nobody's going to be able to make lap time up on the high groove. But it actually it ended up being a lot wider than I kind of had in my mind that it was going to be. So I think the racing actually turned out pretty well, especially considering the lack of action that we've seen with the next gen car on the short tracks here. I think a lot of people were worried that between that and the partial repave of Iowa, that it might not be such a great race. Iowa finally gets their Cup date, and then we end up with a lackluster product here. But I don't think that was the case at all. I think we got a very solid race. I must confess, with it being Father's Day weekend and doing some traveling this weekend, I wasn't able to catch very much of the action live. But from the highlights I saw, of course, it's easy to cherry pick the best moments and put them in a highlight reel. But I thought there was great side-by-side action, multi-groove racing. And that's something that's kind of been lacking in this next-gen era on the short tracks. So that was good to see. Haven't checked the Jeff Gluck poll, but I understand that I think the fan reaction to this race has been more on the positive side. And I think that that's a good thing for everybody at Iowa that worked so hard to get this weekend ready to go. And for all the fans that came out that have been wanting a Cup date in that area of the country and at that track for a long time now. Good to see them get a solid product despite all the uncertainties heading into the weekend. Good to see Adam in the chat here as well. Hi, Ben. Glad to see Ryan Blaney winning at Iowa last night. NBC Sports USA Network coverage was A++. Well, stay tuned for that because I do have some thoughts on the coverage like I teased at the start of the show. And not just the coverage, but I think the fan reaction to coverage as well. It's been a common theme that we've discussed here the last couple of years on the Encore show, with it being NBC's first race back this year. We'll take an opportunity to discuss that here coming up here shortly. But in the meantime, let's move on to the series that we normally cover here on this Encore show and talk about the Xfinity Series. Sam Mayer picked up the win, the sixth of his career, and really put himself in a strong position to take advantage during some late race restarts, and came out on top with a battle with Riley Herbst. So a little bit interesting on the cooldown lap. Riley seemed to bump into Sam's car and cut his left rear tire down. Again, I didn't get to catch much of the racing action live this weekend, but from the highlights I saw, didn't see anything on my end that I would have thought would warrant a reaction like that from Riley. So, a bit of an interesting situation there. We'll see maybe if that rivalry continues here in the second half of the season. But Sam Mayer said something very interesting in the post-race press conference. He was asked if it bothers him that his name has not come up in the Cup Series silly season discussions a little bit more than it has for some of his fellow Xfinity Series drivers or other drivers that are maybe recent graduates of the Xfinity Series that have only raced in Cup for a couple of years. And he said it absolutely bothers him. And, I think that we, at the start of the year, we're looking at Sam's season, really the entire junior motorsports team, and thinking that it might be a long year for them if they couldn't start getting the results that we know that team has historically been capable of. Well, Sam Mayer has done just that. Martinsville actually started a current stretch that he's on 9 races where he's only finished worse than fourth place on 2 separate occasions. Those were Talladega and Portland, where he arguably should have had a top 4 finish. Got spun out and shuffled back with all the chaos in the closing laps there. Certainly not indicative of the pace that he had. And of course, Talladega, really just a wild card in so many different ways. Where so much can go wrong, not of your own doing. So kind of a wild card and an outlier in its own right. But aside from those 2 races, this 9-race stretch that he's been on, very impressive speed, very impressive pace. Now, when I look at Sam's Xfinity career here, this is his 3rd season full-time with Junior Motorsports. Of course, he didn't do too much truck racing. He did get that win with GMS Bristol, but he's kind of had a similar progression to Ty Gibbs and Jesse Love in that, he's so dominant in ARCA and then goes kind of straight into the Xfinity Series in terms of running a full-time schedule. And I think, it took him a little while to get up to speed, but now that he has, I think he certainly has shown that that junior motorsports team is capable of winning on any given race weekend. And when you look at his age, he's going to be 21 later this month. You might say that's a little bit young to consider a Cup Series ride, especially when you consider how long it typically takes rookies to get up to speed in the Cup Series. But Sam Mayer being born in 2003, that's the same year that Carson Hocevar was born. And of course, Hocevar picked up a Cup Series ride this year with the Spire Motorsports team. They clearly saw something in what he was doing in the Truck Series, kind of the opposite of what Sam did, going straight from trucks into Cup with only a handful of Xfinity starts here and there for Hocevar. But I think aside from the maturity issues that we talked about, which, let's be clear, I mean, what 21-year-old isn't that a true sentiment for, that you need to work on that a little bit, especially in a sport like this that requires such discipline. There's no denying that Hocevar has the speed and has the talent to warrant Cup Series consideration, and clearly Spire thought the same way. They gave him that opportunity this year. I think Sam Mayer would certainly be deserving of a similar opportunity should one open up. Now, the problem for Mayer is that I think this silly season is going to be very busy. There's a strong team in Stewart-Haas, or at least a historically strong team. I know they haven't been as strong the last couple of years, but 4 drivers at that SHR program that are seeing their rides go away, that don't necessarily know where those charters are going to end up, where those opportunities and open seats are going to end up. Still a lot of pieces to fall into place of this 2025 puzzle. I don't know that there's going to be an open spot for Sam Mayer at a team that you might think would be a natural progression, like a Hendrick Motorsports, for example. I think they have their lineup pretty much set. Joe Gibbs has the 19 opening up. Of course, we've got the news this week that Martin Truex Jr. is stepping away from full-time racing. But it sounds more and more heavily, these rumors coming in, that Chase Briscoe is a heavy favorite for that seat. So that would be one of his Stewart-Haas drivers finding an opening for him to remain in the Cup Series. But will there be an opening for Sam Mayer to move up to it? That remains to be seen. I don't think that an extra season, one more season of Xfinity, would be something that would stagnate him or ruin his career or anything. But I do think when you look at his results, again, you look at his age and maybe say that he might be on the younger side to justify moving up. But I think his results tell a different story, and his level of experience, how early he got promoted to the Xfinity Series, maybe playing a role in how long it took him relative to some others like Ty Gibbs, who won his debut race, to get up to speed a little bit. But I think now that he's gotten there, certainly showing that, yeah, he does have a right to be a little bit pissed off that he hasn't been included in these conversations a little bit more with how he's been running, particularly over the last 9 or so weeks. So congratulations to Sam Mayer. We'll see if anything opens up for next year, but I would have to agree with him. I think he is absolutely proving right now with how he's running that he is worthy of Cup Series consideration. Now, Riley Herbst, like I mentioned, coming up just short there, being a little bit frustrated with how Mayer raced him at one point during the race, but still a solid run nonetheless for a driver who certainly needs it, because he's got some uncertainty as well. We still don't know exactly what the Stewart-Haas and Ford Xfinity program is going to look like next year. We know obviously the Cup team is shutting down, and we expect the Xfinity programs at the very least look different under different ownership next year. Riley obviously has a lot of sponsorship that he brings, so we'll see. I'm sure that will go no small way in finding him some sort of opportunity next year, but where exactly that is remains to be seen. Now let's go on to the second page of the results here, and let's transition a little bit. Shademan and Gisbergen, I think, kind of came back down to earth this weekend, back to reality for the driver of a number 97 Kaulig Racing Chevrolet. Of course, he won the last two races at Portland and Sonoma on the road courses, which are obviously his bread and butter, where he has a lot more experience than racing on ovals. Now, of course, you probably saw, if you watched post-race press conference that we posted at Portland, my question to him was, after the theme of ovals came up, which ovals in particular are you looking at where you think you might have a shot at taking the win? And he gave a very confident answer, just simply saying the left-handed ones, which I thought was absolutely brilliant, and spoke of his confidence that he is going to pick these tracks up and learn them eventually and find a way to showcase his talent and his speed on something that is so radically different from what he is accustomed to. Unfortunately, didn't get that opportunity this week here at Iowa, midway through the race, kind of losing it in the corner all on his own, crashing into the wall. That was the end of his day. But again, I don't think that that's indicative of his talent by any means, and I don't think it's something that we should necessarily be surprised about or be taken aback and start to panic about either. I think when you compare him to other drivers that have tried to make the switch from a different discipline, you think of Juan Pablo Montoya, who, after he won that Busch Series race in Mexico City, said immediately the next thing we need to do is win on an oval. He could never quite break through, never quite found that opportunity. He looked like he was going to have one at the Brickyard 400 in 2009. Unfortunately, he sped on pit road, and that was that. But, it is a challenging thing to do, to come in here to a completely different discipline and find speed at those tracks, just as Marcus Ambrose, who perhaps is an even more apples-to-apples comparison for SVG, of a Supercars champion, very highly regarded in that series. I think even took a little bit longer to get up to speed on the road and street courses, or not street courses back then, I guess, but the road courses when Marcus Ambrose came over. Of course, SVG won his street course Cup Series NASCAR debut at Chicago last year, which was absolutely sensational. And came back, had another strong run at Indianapolis, now has a couple Xfinity wins. I think speaks very highly of his talent and his ability to adapt to these race cars. Marcus Ambrose even took a little bit of time to get up to speed on those types of tracks, and then, of course, broke through, won a couple of races in Nationwide at the time, won a couple of races at Watkins Glen in the Cup Series, but again, couldn't find that speed and that success to translate over to the ovals before he left NASCAR at the end of 2014. So SVG, I think, if you look at the drivers that have tried to make this switch before, it's not worth panicking over the fact that he, is still struggling at some of these ovals. Of course, other ovals he's had, I think, some very strong top 10 and top 15 runs at, which I think is where we would expect him to be right now on a day where everything goes his way, because the Kaulig cars, obviously, we've seen it with AJ Allmendinger and particularly Josh Williams as well this year. Kaulig doesn't seem to have the speed that they have had the last couple of years. And, Chris Rice and Matt Collick have even admitted as such. They need to work on giving their drivers better cars. SVG obviously has a lot to learn still on these oval tracks. I don't think we can let a 34th place finish at Iowa, in which he wrecked in practice or qualifying, had to go to a backup car, and then wrecked the backup in the race. That we shouldn't let that be something that tells the story of his season by any means, much less his ability to adapt to these ovals here. He still has the entire second half of this season to pick those tracks up, and we'll see what future plans hold for him. Of course, we talked about that a little bit last week on this show. Where will he end up in 2025? I think an argument that I've heard this week is the fact that the next-gen cars are quite different from the Xfinity cars, and you consider SVG is in his mid-30s, doesn't have as much time as some of these drivers like Sam Mayer or Riley Herbst might have to make a career for himself in the Cup Series. Maybe that's an argument for putting him in a next-gen car as soon as next year and not spending another year in Xfinity. But let's wait and see how the second half of the year plays out. Hopefully, this is just a little speed bump in the road, and SVG can bounce back from this and continue his progress through these ovals here in the Xfinity Series. And Adam commenting and chiming in here as well. I think SVG can win at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. That's coming up here. And Pocono, two good tracks. Yes, and Pocono, that's a good point you bring up as well, Adam. I think, I remember back in the open wheel invasion days in 2008, some analysts were saying they thought Pocono might be a good opportunity for some of those road course drivers just because of how different returns are, kind of resembling a road course in some different ways, obviously resembling an oval in many others, but that maybe that could be a track, but SVG's skill set translates over to better than some of the others. And of course, New Hampshire, a flat 1 mile track. We'll see what he can do there. I'm going to have my eye on a different driver for New Hampshire this weekend, though, and I'll talk about that in my final thoughts a little bit later on. Now, let me transition to an open segment here for this evening. NBC Sports made their return, obviously, this week. And if you look at the timeline, you look at the fan reaction, and you compare it to what we saw at Sonoma last week, I think a lot of people are saying that it's night and day. NBC absolutely clears Fox in terms of their coverage. And people that have watched this show know that we have had these discussions here in the past. My biggest issue with NBC, I think I've discovered, is not that the coverage is bad by any means. I think there are certainly things that could use some improvement. I think the booth in particular, I will always prefer Mike Joy over Rick Allen. I understand others that may feel differently, but that's just my personal taste and what I enjoy in a play-by-play broadcaster. There are things that Fox does better than NBC. There are certainly things that NBC does better than Fox. But the general sentiment, the popular take to have online is that NBC is clearly the better broadcaster by a mile. This is a tweet that I saw that I shared this afternoon because I think that it perfectly encapsulates my thoughts that I have on the NBC broadcast and what happens this time of year. Corey Long at Corey L_me28 showing cars in 20th while 3 cars in the top 5 are battling, cutting to commercial before everyone finished the first stage, not even showing the order for the race off pit road. If Fox did that, everyone would be losing their fill in the blank right now, LMAO. And he continued, I don't even think they've shown a single choose either. Like, seriously, is everyone just delusional? Because I swear to God, if Fox did any of this, everyone would be enraged about it. Now, again, like I mentioned, did some traveling this weekend, was out during Father's Day, didn't get a chance to view the full broadcast from start to finish, so I will acknowledge my ignorance in that regard as we're talking about this particular weekend here. I did get to catch a highlight package, and the only other thing that I really noticed was in the Xfinity race when Allmendinger hit the wall, Rick Allen seemed to notice it much sooner than the cameras did, and by the time the cameras got to Allmendinger, he was already almost at a complete stop in the infield grass. So that's another sort of situation where, again, is it the end of the world? I don't think it necessarily is, but I didn't see a lot of outrage about that in my timeline, and I feel like if that had been Fox's cameras and Mike Joy had been shouting about a crash coming off of turn 4 and the cameras had taken a few seconds to get there, we would have been saying, oh, well, there goes Fox again. Missing a wreck, missing the action because they're too busy showing an irrelevant battle for a different spot on the track. So I guess my message to race fans is that if you prefer NBC over Fox, that's totally fine. Like I said, I don't even know that I disagree with you. I think there are certainly things that NBC does better than Fox. All I ask is that you not let the Fox fatigue get to you, that you just hold NBC to the same standard that you hold Fox to, because I do think we need to hold our broadcasters to a certain standard. We need to make sure that they are treating the sport that we know and love with the respect and the quality that it deserves. Fox obviously has fallen well short of that. You need only look at the fan reaction most weekends the first half of NASCAR year, or when they just picked up the IndyCar rights this week as well, or this past week rather. Fans having mixed feelings about that and what that could look like next year. We'll probably save those for Grid tonight or a future roundtable, because I have some thoughts on that as well. I don't want to, get into that here while I don't have anybody to bounce off of. But I think that, when it comes to NBC, that's all I ask, that we be fair and we keep things balanced. That if NBC misses something that they shouldn't, if they're not showing something that they should, that we call that out, that we treat it just as we do for the Fox broadcasts, and we can leave it there. But I will say, from what I saw, I thought the coverage was certainly a step up in many respects. I thought it was not a bad broadcast by any means. My frustration really just, I think, stems from the idea that NBC's coming here to save us. They're absolutely perfect. It's so great to have them back. And I think sometimes we can kind of get trapped in that thinking and not hold them accountable in the same way that we do Fox, even when they make the same sort of mistakes, which again may not be as frequent, but do still happen nonetheless, because nobody is perfect. So we'll keep an eye on NBC throughout the rest of the year, I'm sure, as well, and certainly the fan reaction to that. But I hope that if you caught the racing this weekend, that you certainly enjoyed it, and seems like it was a good race for the debut of Cup racing at Iowa, and the return of NASCAR and NBC, and that's great to see. So hopefully some positive momentum for NASCAR here as we start the second half of the season. And finally tonight, let's close out with an ARCA East combo race. Connor Zilisch won once again for Pinnacle Racing Group. William Sawalich finished in second. An interesting dynamic and championship battle brewing between those two drivers. Zilisch extended his championship lead in the East Series. In the combo series, we'll get into what happened with the points here in just a little bit. But when it comes to Sawalich, he said that he lost some respect for Connor Zilisch and was not too thrilled with how the driver of number 28 raced him for the win. Again, from what I saw during the broadcast, again, I was driving home to Delaware during the actual race, so I didn't get to see from start to finish. But if anything, I thought Sawalich kind of used the bump and run, which, hey, it's totally fair. It's ARCA racing at a short track. But I thought, if anything, Zilisch might have more of a right to be upset with Sawalich than vice versa. So an interesting, like I said, dynamic building between those two drivers. We'll keep our eye on how the championship battle is affected here, because like I've mentioned, the East Series is all combo races from here on out. In the main championship battle series, Andres Perez came home with a sixth place finish. He extends his championship lead because Greg Van Alst and Amber Balkin were taken out in an accident early on in the race. Marco Andretti also got caught up in that. Those were second and third in the points, Van Alst and Balkin, so they drop far back, obviously, with Perez coming home with a strong sixth place finish there. Also some beef between Cody Dennison, perhaps better known on YouTube as Camelot 331. He had an incident with Chris Rice and was not too pleased with how that went down. So bit of a struggle for the Venturini team, kind of across the board, at least with their full-time drivers. Tony Breidinger, solid run in P8, perhaps not as strong as she was in this race last year. And I know she was a little bit frustrated, putting out on her social media that she learned through some mistakes that she made, hopefully to come back a little bit better in the next coming rounds here. But nonetheless, an okay night for her. Gio Ruggiero had an incident where he spun around. He was able to recover to a third place finish, though, for him. So a good result there. But obviously, Balkin with that crash damage, it's been an unfortunate stretch for her, and that obviously hurts her in the points. And then, of course, Chris Wright back there with a 16th place finish. Not a good night for him getting involved in that incident as well. So interesting championship battle brewing on the east side of things. When it comes to the main ARCA Menards Series, though, I think we can pretty much declare Andres Perez your champion-elect at this point. We'll see if anybody can make a run here for the second half of the year, but I would say he is certainly far and away your championship favorite for the main ARCA Menards Series here in 2024. Well, thank you all for sticking with us here tonight. I know the Encore show looks a little bit different here with just me tonight and without a co-host. Hopefully you enjoyed, and hopefully if you couldn't catch this live, you're watching this on playback here. Thank you so much for tuning in. If I had to give a one shining moment this weekend, I guess I would just say the Iowa Speedway in particular. Great job putting this event on, and I know that this is something that they have been wanting for a long time, to bring the Cup Series to this racetrack. Great result for them, I think, despite the concerns that we had about tires and despite the concerns we had about the partial repave. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with that, because I think some drivers are already thinking ahead here into the future around the time of 2030 as that bottom groove starts to age a little bit. Do you wait to repave the top of the track and then you create a whole different potential dynamic and put the fresh asphalt up on the top groove as opposed to just the bottom there? I think that could make for some exciting racing as well. So maybe we'll have that to look forward to 6 to 10 years down the line. We'll see what Iowa decides to do here. But nonetheless, a very, very good weekend for everybody out there. And hopefully everybody watching at home enjoyed the action as well. Lots to look forward to as we get into the second half of this season here. Thank you all so much for watching tonight. And thank you, Kobe, as well. My one shining moment goes to you, Ben, for doing a great job flying solo tonight. Kobe, I appreciate that. And we'll look forward to seeing you back here later this week on Wednesday as well for Grid Tonight. You can stay tuned for that. And for all our Grid programming coming up this week, be sure to subscribe to the Grid Network. So I look to find the social media graphic. There it is. Subscribe so that you don't miss any of our upcoming program. And you can follow us on all our social media platforms, X/Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, LinkedIn, Threads, most importantly, right here on YouTube. Thank you all again for your continued support as we move well beyond 1,000 subscribers now. If you really liked what you saw tonight, you can take a few minutes after the show to consider joining our Patreon. Join Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew in investing in the Grid Network and helping keep us on the air throughout 2024 and beyond, and helping us continue to build our programs here at Grid. Our long-term goal of $500 per month will allow us to begin attending races on site on a more regular basis, and that will only continue to expand our coverage for you, the viewers. You can also become a member of the Grid YouTube channel, or if you'd rather make a one-time donation instead, you can visit the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box below. You can buy a coffee for your favorite on-air talent. Any amount will help us continue to grow our motorsports media outlet. Or if you're watching us on YouTube live, we have the super chats after the fact, or if you're watching one of the clips, we have the super thanks enabled as well. Now, like I mentioned, Kobe will be back on Wednesday with Grid Tonight with Josh Birch and Matt White, so stay tuned for that. Women in Motorsports will hopefully be back this week as well. And then you can stay tuned for more Grid Live coverage coming up this weekend, and then right back here for another Encore show. Hopefully everything will be back to normal with me and Brandon next week. Thank you for sticking with us here as I've been in California, been back traveling back to my usual base in Massachusetts and doing the show on Tuesday last week. Now back here in Delaware by myself, flying solo on a Monday. Thank you for sticking with us through all of it. For Brandon Cross, my usual co-host, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you for watching. We will see you next week on another episode of Grid Encore.